And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we're gonna continue to work on relative pronouns this week with a second worksheet. I'm not going to cover interrogative pronouns on this worksheet. That'll be the next activity we do. The reason why is there's a lot of information to cover with relative pronouns, so I want us to kind of focus on that for today's activity. You will see that there are some characteristics that are very similar, including the words that we use to introduce those phrases or clauses that modify our nouns, okay? So let's just go ahead and begin. If you have any questions, again, you can always reach me on email. You can always send me a message on Remind, and I'll be happy to respond and help you in any way that I can. All right, so relative pronouns are part of a phrase or clause that modify a noun or pronoun. Relative pronouns are placed directly after the noun or pronoun they modify. Now, this is going to be interesting, difficult possibly, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. And that's why I provided this explanation. We pay attention here to the last part of this definition. Relative pronouns are placed directly after the noun or pronoun they modify. We're going to use 5 different pronouns today. That, which, who, whom, and whose. And what this definition is telling us is that we're going to use one of these 5 words, and one of these 5 words that we're going to use today are going to be directly after the noun or pronoun they modify. Directly after. So, if we look at a sentence down here, just briefly, before we actually begin using the sentences. The new restaurant that opened last week sells the best cookies in town. If I were to place the word that here, which is what we are supposed to do, that is one of the 5 words up here. And if you look where it is directly after the noun is modifying. So the noun that we're going to modify is restaurant. If we keep that in the back of our minds throughout this activity, it'll be a lot easier. And the reason why is because we have several nouns in this sentence here. We have restaurant, we have last week, we have cookies, and we have town. We have a lot of nouns. So we need to know which noun we are referring to when we want to modify or describe, and an easy way to remember that is that it's going to be directly after the noun it's modifying. So when you ask yourselves questions about who versus what, you can answer that by simply looking at the word right before it. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing that's going to make this activity as easy as possible, is we're just going to locate where these pronouns are and where they are and what they're actually going to modify, okay? So let's go back up here and read what we're going to do. Part A, relative pronoun identification. Directions. Read each definition and place the pronoun in the blank space. This will help you practice correct pronoun usage while you observe characteristics of the pronoun usage. Okay, so the first word we're going to look at is that. I've given us 5 sample sentences that use the word that. I've also provided a definition here for us. That is used to describe an object or another non-human being. The word that will provide necessary information about the noun it is describing. The information it provides is considered necessary because it cannot be cut out of the sentence and still convey the intended meaning. Okay, so what that long definition means is when we use the word that, it's going to describe a thing, not a person, a thing. It's really important that we see the difference between that and who. And so just remember that when you use the word that, it's not going to be a person, it's going to be a thing. That's the first thing. The second thing is when we use the word that, it's going to have information that we need to really understand the sentence. More importantly, to really understand the noun. Okay? So if we look at the first sentence there, the new restaurant that opened last week sells the best cookies in town. If I were to remove this phrase, or this clause, that opened last week, if I were to just take it out and just say the new restaurant sells the best cookies in town, you might ask yourself, well, Carlon, which restaurant are you talking about? Are you talking about the new restaurant in Tolleson? Are you talking about the new restaurant at Arrowhead Mall? Which one? And so you kind of need that information there in order to know what I'm specifically referring to. So that's the word that. And I've provided you with 5 samples because I want you to practice actually putting the word that in a sentence and trying to identify the phrase or clause that it is used, that it is describing. Okay. So for example, we know that we're going to use the word that here, and that is referring to computers. And number 3, we're going to put the word that. It's going to refer to the word marker. And number 4 is going to refer to players, and 5 is going to refer to puppy. That's the pattern we're looking for, okay? So that's how you're going to use that word. I say that a lot. All right, so let's look at the next word. So if we look, remember we're looking at 5 words today. That, which, who, whom, and whose. I'm just going to cover which as well as that because I want you to practice this on your own and see if you can develop an understanding of those characteristics yourself. Okay, so the word which. Which can be used the same way that is used, but it can also provide information that is not required to describe a noun or pronoun. For this activity, we will look at sentences that use which to provide information that is not required to describe the noun or pronoun, but still provide useful information. This relative pronoun and clause are easy to identify because it will have commas on both sides. Let me explain what this means. When we use the word that, the way we're using it today, the word that is going to introduce information that we need to understand the noun in order to make sense of the sentence, okay? It's required information. When we use the word which, the way we're going to use it today, that information is not required, but it's good information to have. It means that it helps us understand what we're referring to, but it's not needed. Additionally, we're going to have commas on both sides of it. So we have a comma on this side and we have a comma on this side. It's going to separate this entire clause, okay, from the rest of the sentence. So I'm just going to put the word which in there. And let's read the sentence. The dry erase marker, which does not work, is still on Mr. Carlon's desk. Now, when we see this sentence, we can see that if we have 2 commas that are at the both sides of this relative clause, and if I were to remove all this information here, the sentence still makes sense. It reads, the dry erase marker is still on Mr. Carlon's desk. We know that the marker is on his desk, and we probably know what we're referring to, but Mr. Carlon might have 20 markers on his desk. He doesn't want to get rid of any of them. Maybe only one of them isn't working. So the information here that we provide, it's not required, but it does help us. And so, since it's not required, we use commas to tell the reader that. And our tone, when we speak it, changes slightly. The dry erase marker, which does not work, is still on Mr. Carlon's desk. that subtle pause and change in voice, it leads us to know that we're kind of being specific about which marker we're referring to. It adds additional information, but it's not required to understand what we're trying to say. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so if you look at this, number 7 through 10, same thing. We have commas in the middle of the sentence that separate the relative clause from the rest of the sentence. Just make sure you use the word which, okay? You're gonna do the same thing by reading the definitions for who, whom, and whose, and then simply placing that word, that respective word in each of the blank spaces here, okay? I do not want you, I'm writing them in there so you can see what I'm asking you to do, but I definitely want you to spend time trying to understand why you're using them, how you use them, and the differences between that, which, who, whom, and whose, okay? So just go ahead and do that. And once you finish that, there's an activity at the end of this. I'm gonna want you, I kind of mixed them all in there, okay? So you have 10 sentences, which means you're gonna have to use each of these relative pronouns twice, okay? So make sure that you do that, all right? So I didn't put them in here because we use them, but let me just put them down here on the side in case you need them. That, which, who, whom, and whose. You have to use each of these 2 times. Okay, you have 10 sentences and 5 pronouns. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Once you submit it, I will make sure I grade it and give you some feedback. You can reach me under mine, or you can reach me through email. But I do feel like this can be a little bit more of a difficult activity, so don't get frustrated with it. Try to work through it, and if you don't understand it, I'm always here to help. That's it for today, guys. I hope you're all doing well and you stay safe. And again, can't wait to see you guys next year. Can't wait to get back into the classroom. Until then, you guys stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.